Throughout this Let's Play, I've tended to avoid either lengthy or explicit statements about the puzzles and overall design of Fez. Since the point of about 60% of the videos was to let the atmosphere shine through, at most I limited it to a quick comment about whatever specific section we were going through at the time. Now that we're at the end of the series, the only big question I think I haven't answered is what do I actually think of the puzzles, considering one of the biggest complaints about the game is the design of the puzzles and their repetitive nature. For starters, I think calling Fez a puzzle platformer is too limiting to describe what it actually sets out to do. Or, to put it another way, puzzle platformer is so broad of a genre that while it technically encompasses Fez, I don't think it's necessarily the best descriptor for the game. Technically, half of the game is puzzle solving. There are 64 cubes, 32 of which are collected through puzzles. However, you may have noticed that over half of those 32 anti-cubes were an abstraction of the input cipher. Of the remaining anti-cubes, most of them involve puzzles which are repeated: treasure chests, QR codes, tuning forks, and so on. The bell tower, cube net, tetromino, generator, skulls, owls, and the clock tower, I suppose, are the only actually unique puzzles in the game, bringing the total number of puzzles to around 10 or 11 in the entire game. In a game whose genre is half defined by puzzles, that seems a bit imbalanced, but Fez is clearly not a traditional puzzle platformer. These sorts of games typically have a very self-contained level structure, where the puzzle is to collect a set of objects or make it to the exit using a specific set of platforming skills. Sometimes they have a story connecting them, and some of them hit certain emotional or political themes in a powerful way, but there's a stark difference between what something like Braid, And Yet It Moves, Blocks That Matter, Closure, Tokitori, Thomas Was Alone, World of Goo, The Bridge, and many others set out to do and what Fez does. At its heart, I think Fez is an exploration game. Platforming, perspective shifting, cryptography, these are your tools to assist in that, certainly, but at its core, it's about exploring to find the cubes to save the world, and, to a lesser extent, find out the history of a vast world that you're all but thrown into. The fact that most of the puzzles in the game repeat themselves or can be boiled down to strikingly similar, fairly simple concepts even for a puzzle game, yes, I think that's bad design. However, I also think that those puzzles serve the purpose of the game perfectly fine as a means to discover more about the world. I alluded to it in a previous video, but I think the cubes, especially the anti-cubes, are predominantly representative of knowledge and the pursuit of knowledge. Most of them are locked behind constructs of information, if not ones which exist in the world, like the clock tower and the observatory, then more abstract elements like the straightforward puzzle rooms. I think it makes sense that the knowledge of the input cipher, number system, and alphabet cipher are three big keys that allow you to traverse a world that was built generations before you came along and had its own rules, systems, and languages by which society operated, rather than having to solve lots of small, iterative puzzles to get past one door at a time in a fairly arbitrary fashion as far as the game world was concerned. So no, I don't think the repetitive nature of the puzzles is an inherently bad design choice. Perhaps a little overused in the case of the input cipher, but not bad. Some of the puzzles themselves I do think could have been done better though. The inclusion of QR codes was handled poorly, especially when the game initially released and room borders on the map screen wouldn't update immediately, causing people to get confused when they'd pick those cubes up. An image based around a binary set of colors and right angles fits thematically with the world and the hinted narrative of the entire world of Fez existing within virtual reality, and with so many puzzles breaking out of the traditional boundaries we consider games existing in, I can understand why Fish wanted to include them, but tying them to puzzles creates the problem of requiring alternative solutions to make up for people who couldn't scan them. Implementing them the way the Talos principle did may have worked better, though Fez is much more visual in its storytelling, so it's hard to even say. Another problem I have is with a specific part of the owl puzzle. Deciphering the clues and finding the locations of the owls through Geezer's paintings is fine, I don't have a problem with that, but I think there needed to be something, even minor, to suggest to the player that they'd need to use the talk button to converse with the owls. A slight change to the owl statue's clue wording could have achieved this. Alternatively, the game could have given the player the option to speak to any animal. I've seen people play through the introduction and attempt to do this, so letting them speak to dogs and cats and birds and so on, only to be given an onomatopoeia in response, would have made them assume that any animals would have nothing to say and write owls off when they would see them initially. The hard part about suggesting a change that drastic, however, is that testing it would be a lengthy process to say the least. The most egregious of the unique puzzles is the clock tower, if we can define it as such. I think the timed anti-cube concept is great. What I don't think is great is the fact that the times are not set in stone, but determined by some other factor, probably file creation time. This means that many people can and did find themselves in the frustrating position of having to change their system clock to catch the cubes because the weekly cube would be set to spawn when they were at work, fast asleep, or similarly unavailable. Two alternatives were already suggested in the thread, both of which I like. One is a simple change, where the clocks aren't based around a scale of 60 minutes to the hour and 24 hours to the day. By changing it to be less on both, the greater two cubes would always be shifting their spawn times. The second was the idea that the clock faces represent an XYZ transform axis, and that moving the hands to match a clue given in the world would yield a single anti-cube. Both of these, I think, are good solutions to the problem, though I'd lean more towards the latter, something which lets the player stay involved, and not feel like the best course of action on their part is to actually stop playing the game for nearly an hour. Aside from these three main issues, I don't really see any major flaw in the puzzles. They do exactly what they're meant to do, which is encourage and reward exploration, and most of them don't intrude on the atmosphere that the regular game works so hard to build up. I had originally planned on saying that I thought Phil Fish made a crucial mistake in presenting the game in demos and marketing with just the platforming elements, and making no hints whatsoever that there would be any puzzles that would require code breaking. After all, people who might not enjoy puzzles could play the game under the impression that the game doesn't contain them, and come away with a negative experience when they find out that it does. However, I think that criticism falls away when you strip away the puzzle platformer label from the game. Doing so makes it hard to simply explain who would like the game, I'll admit, but the truth is that Fez is a hard sell in general beyond the core gameplay hook. Fish had said that he wanted the game to be slow-paced, to be a game that encouraged players to stop and smell the roses, and to harken back to a time when secrets and Easter eggs were found thanks to your uncle at Nintendo, then shared on the playground. I think he achieved that, and in doing so created a game that is fantastic, and yet incredibly hard to convince people to play without either lying about what it is, giving away all of its secrets, or setting people up with preconceived expectations. Saying Fez is a relaxed exploration platformer with cryptography puzzles and a cool perspective-shifting mechanic is about as well as you can explain it, but that still probably wouldn't work. The only real way to make someone understand just how amazing Fez is to show them, or get them to play it for themselves, which is probably the best thing you can say about a video game. If you'd asked me when the game first came out if I thought Fez was representative of 4 years of development time, I'd have said no. Between a host of bugs that caused slowdown, the occasional crash, and even erased files, the act of playing the game genuinely wasn't fun at times, and it made it hard to appreciate the care that had been put into the world that lay before me. With the PC release, all apparent bugs ironed out, and a distinct lack of any zeitgeist, I found it far easier to appreciate everything that it would have taken to develop the game, and my answer now would be absolutely. Fez is a unique experience, and one of the best examples of what video games can do that other mediums can't. Regardless of your opinion of the developer and any controversy surrounding him, I think Fez is absolutely worth playing no matter who you are. Buy it, get a nice sound system or a pair of headphones, full screen the game, and just chill.